Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive, said author Howard Thurman. Welcome to the second season of the Vulnerable Power Show. Heart-to-heart, unscripted dialogues with world leaders who are shining examples of the unfolding leadership ascension. Hear from these creative leaders and visionary entrepreneurs who have traversed deep leadership transformations and inner alchemy, actualizing their vision for a better world. We share raw insights and practical tips so you too can transform painful experiences and old energies as fuel for your leadership growth and collective good. Join us and listen in so we can all bring hope, inspire transformation, uplift the world, and show what is possible through heart-centered, vulnerable leadership. As Margaret Mead, anthropologist, once said, "Never believe that a few caring people can't change the world. For indeed, that's all who ever have." Greetings, everybody. Greetings, and welcome back to the Vulnerable Power Show. I'm Haas Sadeghi, and you are now watching the second season. I wouldn't have ever thought I would have a show or be hosting a show and having such amazing guests, let alone a second season. If you're new to the show, new to me, I invite you to check out the first season on the YouTube channel. Subscribe if you haven't. So why are we here? What is this Vulnerable Power Show all about? Well, I had this idea because I myself went on a very transformational and potent journey. And I had the inspiration to provide a forum where we could host heart-centered leaders, the future of leadership. As many of you have already been feeling, the last 2 years have been really filled with dynamicism, change, and so much flux energy. So this is meant to be a deep dive into the heart of leadership, to spotlight ascended leaders, leaders that are really embodying their divine calling, their mission, and bringing together soul and impact for a collective good, to inspire those listening wherever you are in your leadership journey, that it is possible, to give you these insights, tips, and also share the vision that these leaders have for a better world for all of us together. So if that resonates, keep watching. So as always, I like to start and tee up the guest who we have here today, our dear soul brother, William, by explaining how I met them and how our paths crossed. And so William here and I met through a lot of people. And I'll give you a quick parenthetical. A lot of people use words willy-nilly, and I tend to be more precise because I believe and hold this truth that the words construct our reality. So we call it networking. I prefer to call it net caring. Net caring. So I met William through a net caring platform, and I gotta say, immediately blown away by his ability to hold such potent space, and then also be able to have such an expansive consciousness. And I was really, not to be an ageist, I was blown away at how young he was when we first spoke, because I thought he was much older in biological age. So this, coupled with his altruistic motive, which he's going to share here today with us, was definitely a reason that I felt inspired to have him on for the second season. So without further ado, Sir William of the crypto community, how are you today, brother?
My brother Haas, I am doing amazing. Thank you. I feel truly honored and blessed to have been invited to come onto your podcast here. I really love what you've been doing, and it's been this kind of beacon of hope and inspiration for myself, and I know other people, and that you really are this this beacon of change and inspiration and like overflowing amount of love and support. And I truly cannot thank you enough for being you and opening up the space for the collective entity. Right?
If you try to make me cry, you're doing a good job, bro. I love you. I receive all that. Thank you, brother.
Chris, I love you too,
Appreciate
man.
that. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And yeah, it's the resonance is mutual. So without further ado, to dive right in, I mean, I don't like to waste time and we have a lot of ground to cover. I know you're very passionate about what you're doing now. So before you get to kind of your mission and your vision for what you're doing now and to spotlight that and how your transformation journey shaped what you're doing and your
Mhm.
passion for the collective, can you share kind of what I call like the transformational journey, the inner alchemy? You know, I phrase it different ways. In the first season, we talked about it more like the dark night of the soul, which is
Yeah.
a more mystical connotation. So what if you could give us a glimpse of like a before and after, and we'll take it from there and flow from
Yeah.
there as usual.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. Like, I think a good place to start would be um, um, so I went to a university called Wesleyan over in Connecticut, and immediately going there, it was like this feeling of kind of having these illusory, uh, like almost like a cage that been in my mind that I had like drawn up, being like growing up in this like kind of guarded, protective, and loving family. But this feeling of being in high school and then not going to that next step is like, oh, that was like that next step. And once I hit that next step, it was like, okay, now I could feel like I can be more like myself, like truly myself, and go out and meet new people and kind of explore a different part of the world and country that I had never been to before. So upon me going there, I brought, I guess, my mind with me, and my mind, so I didn't leave my mind. It was like wherever you go, there you are. And it's like I realize that now, like in that, in that moment when I was at Wesleyan, it was still tough because I hadn't brought in this mental acuity and self-awareness to be aware of the thoughts in my mind, because a lot of the thoughts were still anxious, still concerned about what people were thinking about me, what I should be doing, what class I should be taking. Oh, look at these other people taking the other class. I don't really feel like going to class. And maybe I'm going to skip a couple classes and then kind of tell my mom about it. She's like, what are you doing? Like, you're wasting money. And then so kind of this emotional turmoil comes up. So then I have to say, like, I started picking up some bad habits and, would kind of use these clutches, like excessively smoking marijuana, like drinking alcohol, and then even getting into like some barbiturates when like I had this like a little bit of an injury on my back with squash, where it was like it was almost impossible for me to get up without being like, oh, it's like an
Did you
old,
say
like a
squash?
95
Did you say
squash,
squash?
squash.
That is such an East Coast like
I know, I
waspy
know,
sport, dude.
I know,
I don't think I played racquetball, not squash. So
I
anyways, keep going.
know,
It's
I
funny. I
know.
was like, did he say he has a squash injury?
I know, I know. It's a funny sport. It's actually the sport that's played in the most countries around the world, like that and football, soccer. It's
Wait,
like in the
squash?
yeah, it's
Not
in like
racquetball,
160.
squash? Really?
Yeah, squash. Yeah, it's in 165 countries around the world.
Wow.
It's pretty phenomenal. Like, yeah, Egypt is kind of the hub. So yeah,
Anyways,
and
back to
so
you. Yeah, you're
yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah. So that was like, well, that was an amazing outlet for me. And I've always found like sports to be this outlet of flow, where that, obviously
Mm.
about flow and that feeling of being oneness with whatever I'm doing, and kind of not feeling like I have to follow what my mind is saying, but I already know what I should be doing because I'm so with it. Where time kind of has this distorting factor, where then you have brought this awareness in me that I can then have that more clairvoyance and the feeling of the eternalness that because of you, and that I've now can reflect and look back on that is what the state I was in, and which is why I was so drawn to it. And then I think is why I was good at it, because I enjoyed it so much. So it was like, well, I want to keep doing it. And I want to keep doing it, because it was like the more I got better at it, then the more the flow would be like, oh, wow, this is like a state of consciousness that I can enjoy. And I had these amazing conversations with my teammate. And so yeah, was still stuck in my mind, right? And I was stuck in these extremely negative cyclical feedback loops of self-hatred, um, and then not respecting my parents, losing friendships that I had from high school because I was so depressed that it was hard for me, since I didn't love myself, then I couldn't
Mm.
give out the love into other people. So, um, and
So let's unpack some of this before we continue. This is really good stuff per usual. And that, as if you've never joined us before, we go unscripted here.
yeah,
So we have a general idea and we kind of flow from there. So a couple of things. So this is brilliant because you as you know me well by now, the last year, we are speaking my lingo. So there's three things that I wanted to unpack and before you continue on your
absolutely.
transformation.
Yeah.
So mental cage, identity, constructs, loops, right?
Yeah.
And so talk to me about that. What do you mean? Because that's a basis for what
Mm,
and before you do that, for those that are new to these topics, because we have a lot of different spectrums of people that I know tune in, some more advanced, some newer, peeking into these concepts of what's consciousness, mindful leadership, what is ascended leadership.
yeah,
So this notion for everybody that's listening to their context before William
sure.
talks about this, because Will already knows this, is energy is cyclical, energy is patterns, it's all energy. And
Mm,
so because everything is frequency, energy, and waves, as Nikola Tesla said, and many other scientists and other mystics, et cetera, and this convergence of knowing,
mm,
there's patterns. And sometimes we create these constructs, these loops, and we get caught. And that's what the word karma meant in the
mm.
Vedic Sanskrit. So Will, talk to me and the audience about what was your experience in those loops. Can you give a flavor with this in mind, with the concept of how did you break those loops, giving us a before and after, or how did you deal with those loops, so to speak, before we go on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and first to what you're saying about like this kind of cage of the mind almost, like I'd always been interested in the mind and like potential, what like the human potential. So I was really drawn to Jason Silva
Hmm.
back when I was in high school. And just to give an audience some like perception of how, like I'm 23 right now, so I just turned 23. So I was back in high school about 6, 7 years ago, kind of in my peak in high school. Like you don't want to peak in high school, like right, like so I definitely didn't. So like when I was 16 years old in high school, I was watching these shots of awe by Jason Silva,
Wow.
and it was like him talking about that there is more than just what we can even see and imagine. It's like how we perceive a certain nanometer length within the wavelength of the visible light spectrum. So then it was like, well, if I can only see this, and then based on, well, my reality is only like the assumptions, expectations I have based on that. And if there is more, well, what if there's a glimpse into something else? And then are then there's other thoughts that are preventing me from then going out and doing things like I'm really afraid of, like starting a new project or like working on my craft, whether it's like be squash or tennis or different sports that I was interested in, or even going up to a girl that was like attractive and saying hello, like having the first step, because there's this like illusory wall that I'm like putting myself in front of like that. So it's really interesting. And then at Wesleyan was more negative, especially when the fraternity kind of came around, because it was like this cyclical brotherhood, which it's not really a brotherhood. I mean, they make you drink and I'll happily say this, and anyone can argue against it, but it's like this extremely toxic environment where they say, yeah, for you to come up and for us to have this reunion together, you have to go through your own like you have to go through your own like cyclical toxification, like not in the detoxification where you're like aligning in your higher self, but literally riddling your body with toxins and drugs and as much drugs as you can do at a single point of time. It's like, and then that literally it would make me think that this is normal and that this is good and that I should then go out and do this again and then bring other people into this clan that we should all be getting super drunk and being abusive with each other, being angry, nasty, like extremely egocentric and toxic. And honestly, Haas, the only beacon of light and love and the divine nature that was within me, the only way that I could realize that was through plant medicine. I
Hmm.
mean, truly the only way. I mean, my mother has always cared about me and loved me so much unconditionally. And so she would say, well, go speak to a therapist, go speak with someone. I'd always been like, no, I don't want to do that. And so yeah, I mean, I turned into LSD, and I had some LSD experiences that dissolved all the boundaries and all the veils of illusion, and where I was then able to see my thoughts, like a negative thought, like I hate myself, or you're not good at this, or you should be going to class, or instead of seeing that as myself and then feeling the negative emotion around that, and then that being the being of will, that I could see that as outside of me. So it was like this extreme awakening of clairvoyance that I am beyond that, that there is like these elevated states of consciousness that, with going within, only when you turn within, like you're saying, that karmic wheel, to then unravel that mess and that turmoil and truly surrender, and, and to feel all the pain, not to then dissociate from the pain again, to truly feel all of it. Because until you can feel all of it, then you can then go to the next phase and then learn from that and be grateful, and actually see that, the toughest moments in life, that whether a family member has died or like a hard psychedelic experience, those are the most insightful, and those are the best experiences to
Hmm.
have. And so, yeah, I mean, I had some mystical experiences like that awakened me, yet I was still such a novice that what did I do again next weekend? Go to a party and start drinking again. Like, and so, um,
So let's unpack this, because before we go on to the next topic, because we're a lot of topics coming up, and it's good because I take notes and keep maintaining the flow. So here it's for the audience. Let me feed this back and tell me if it's I'm hearing you correctly, because I sense I am, for the audience's sake too.
yeah,
Because if you're joining us, he's a very, very, what I would call, gifted being, because there's research out there I've talked about in the first season. Highly sensitive people, I don't like that term. Extrasensory, the science is showing us, mysticism and science is converging, and I talk a lot about that in various platforms. So the reason I say this is that William has some natural gifts, some innate extrasensory gifts that make him, shall we say, able to maneuver energies. And I really am promulgating this term. Some other colleagues are energetic intelligence. We talk about emotional intelligence. We have IQ, intelligence, and then we even have body intelligence. Nobody's really talking about soul intelligence, or I have a couple colleagues call it awareness quotient. So Will is very gifted. So real quick, for the audience's sake, so the way I understand it, Will, is when you create a mental construct, right? So
yeah,
I'm a being looking up through these eyes, and this is me. This
yep,
is
yep,
my environment. I am Persian. I have a beard. I am this thing that's informed.
yeah,
So what you're saying is, then we create that as the only
mm,
reality,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
and then all along, and I have a lot of notes that we're going to unpack, and I know for you, consciousness and plant medicine is part of what you're doing, along with blockchain and technology. So we're previewing what's to come in this episode.
yeah,
So what I wrote earlier, on this initial subtopic, is we have our mental, who Haas thinks he is, who Will thinks he is, coupled with all of this social conditioning. You
mm,
allude to herd mentality or herd spells, like a magical term, like
yeah,
we kind of fall under the spell. Let's put the secret societies, occult orders, and fraternal orders that you and I know a lot about to the side, because that's what
yeah,
fraternities are, which
right,
you don't have to believe in any of that, because we have these constructs in society, the
mm,
patriarchy and all that. So you've touched on that. All that aside, that's who you think you are, this identity
mm,
construct, which is the looping in the cage. And then on this side, I love what you said earlier. I wasn't being my true self, or what I call this unique essence or this unique vibration, right? So you
Yeah.
were only being this limited part of your consciousness, it sounds
Yeah.
like.
It-
And it
uh,
sounds like what you did to free it was to surrender. I think that's the key, that what you said there, you surrender to it all. You surrender to feeling, you surrender
yeah.
to the experiences, and then the plant medicine obviously was a gateway for you. Does that resonate? Am I hearing you correctly?
Absolutely. And I think
Okay.
one good analogy is like that I realized that I am the dance. Before I thought that I was the dancer and that I
Ooh,
was
whoa,
always,
unpack that slowly, brother. Whoa.
yeah,
That's deep.
abs-
So talk to us about
yeah. And so this is something that I would definitely, well, this was a quote from Eckhart Tolle, and someone who's been like you and such an unconditionally giving spiritual teacher. And he had this quote where that you are the dance, right? And he actually said this on the Oprah Winfrey show when he was on there, that before people always think that they're the dancer, right? That life is happening to us. Oh, just not the, God, another damn thing. Like, you know, like where then if you, so then that's the construct, because it's happening to me, like ego thinking that it's the center of the universe. When in fact, the greatest realization, kind of what I was talking about, is that we are not the center of the universe. And we are not. We are a speck of dust in this galaxy, and then in an ocean of other galaxies, and then in the multiverse. I mean, we are nothing, literally.
it.
And then, like, nothing in the construct. And that we are the microcosm of the macrocosm. So it's like, you know, these levels almost. Like in the awakened mind, we are everything, not everything like, oh, it revolves around me. Everything is in, we're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's this unified field of where the tree is communicating, like it, you know, how our all environment works, us breathing in the breathing in oxygen, and then the trees are then bringing in these unbelievable wavelengths of energy that are then circulating throughout the entire globe, and that allow for this ecology to be alive. I mean, it's like magic,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Well, it is divine magic. And so this I am the dance, not the dancer, before we go to the unique expression vibrational part and the surrendering, or what I call the yes. There's this notion when you say I am the dance, I am the dance, not the dancer. In this first season, it's this victim consciousness. And I like that,
Yeah,
because you're the dance is really reclaiming your power, and as well as what you alluded to, highlighting the interconnectedness of it all,
yeah,
right? This
exactly.
interconnectedness of it all. So what was your relationship? So to this, on still on this first topic before we continue in these
Yeah.
episodes kind of unpack in length. So what it was your experience with this being your true self and your unique expression? Because what I wrote earlier when you talked about your human potential, and a lot of the notes that I've been taking to kind of remember so we can flow through this, is what if there's more than I know? So it
Mm,
sounds like when you do this construct thing,
mm.
that then you limit your experience, and then in
That,
that limiting your experience, you then don't experience anything outside of that, which is your
absolutely.
truth, right? Your
I-
truth. So correlate that for us before you move to how you surrendered and what surrender meant.
yeah, I mean, that's like even practicing like when I started practicing a meditation, like you are not your mind, you are not your body. There is this feeling of like this inner beingness that before it always been overlooked, always been to the next thing and the next thing. And especially me growing up in a family where I'm always playing sports, going to the next thing, talking about all the stuff that's happening. And you know, it's like to have a moment, to have a single moment to be and to feel that there is something else rather than what constantly is filtering through like a program, like an automatic play, like on a tape recorder set or something like that. So it's like almost that feeling. It's like that life had kind of been this movie that I just
This
been
spell.
seeing.
Like a
Yeah, the
spell. How
spell.
did you
That's
so how did you dispel to get into? How did you dispel these mental spells, right? Because you said a magic, it's magic.
yeah.
So let's use a magical terminology.
Yeah, and
How
it's
did you
almost like
dispel
it's
to be
almost like
yourself?
it's
Yeah.
almost like acknowledging that spell, whether or not it was really like it's good for the ego because it was holding the ego in that's identity, and that's all it needs to know. And then no matter what, the ego feeds off of anything, right? And so it's like me acknowledging that and seeing it for what it is, accepting it, and then surrendering into that, and then actually feeling all the emotions and trauma that had come up, because it could be from, something that happened to go like that some excuse me something that happened a couple months ago that had really like affected me emotionally, or a few years ago, or when I was 5 years old, like a trauma, or even lifetimes ago. and yeah, we have this, like the conditioning, and Gabriel Mate talks about it so well, especially in the Western society, of us disassociating with that feeling. It's like if a feeling of angst comes up in my stomach, usually the conditioned self, the conditioned mind will want to find something else as a crutch, like whether it's like it could even be something so small as like a twitch in the neck, because it's like pulling away the vibrational frequency of actually letting that energy flow through, because it may be so intense that at that evolutionary step for that being, that they may not be ready for it, you know.
It's higher
So
vibration than they can handle. Well, so this is interesting because earlier you said overlooked. You overlooked, this oneness consciousness, you overlooked. And I think that's a very fascinating word because it speaks to overlooking the trauma, overlooking the energies we've compiled, overlooking the access we have for this oneness consciousness that we're speaking to and about, overlooking who our true self is. And what causes it is the mind, it sounds like. And I don't like all the talk about the ego and get rid of the ego. And you and I have talked about this a lot. It's more of, and hence the point of the show, heart-centered, is more of sublimating the mind and ego. Is really bringing them down into the body, embodying the mind, and then from there coming from the heart center. So you're dispelling this programming, this disprogramming, right? How did you? So when you talk about surrender and feeling it all, right? And I love how you brought up Gabor and Eckhart and some other way showers. What was, now let's get real precise for a second, and then I'll bring up the other topics that I still want to talk about. That we're still only in your transformational part. It's this notion of, so when you then saw the spell, you saw the identity constructs, you started to have these gateways, these outlets, which was plant medicine, which we'll talk more about later in this episode. Then you're waking up and going, okay, so that's then the contrast, right? That you're seeing, because you're now having stepped out of that, hence the altered states of consciousness, stepping out of that. Then you're looking at this. So that seems to be where we're at in this dialogue of mental cage is here, your true vibration is here. You unpacked, you saw it, then you start to unpack all this junk and start to get rid of it so you could be the no thingness, right?
And I think even before the unpacking is that there was such a mess already, and it's like before I had been in the mess, and all I knew was the mess, all I knew was the mind and the thoughts around that, whether it was even
did you admit it was messy? Well, did you honestly, for the audience, did you admit it was messy, or did you convince yourself I'm good, like me and many others, pretty much the world that's in a pandemic of trauma?
No, I mean, I knew that I was fucked up.
How did you know? Well, so how did you know? So some people
Well,
go, how can I know I'm in trauma?
When I find myself on my bed crying for 3 hours during a plant medicine experience, I'm like,
Well, let's leave that alone for a second. Pause. Let's leave the plant medicine alone. Outside of that tool to access these altered states, to see these conditionings or these spells, or outside of that, how? Because I literally got asked that by a client today. And I get that asked a lot. Literally, before we start, I got a message. Hey, Haas, I saw you speak on a workshop. How do I know I have trauma? And that's a good question. I'm like, there are no, there's all good questions. We always think, oh, this is a good question. No, like, that's a, because she's like, sorry for my naivete. And I'm like, no, that's
I could tell you one thing. One thing is that I actually would carry trauma like in my gut.
Oh, talk about that. So unpack what your symptoms were, or how you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think it started more when I was maybe 16 years old. So this is when I was like a sophomore at high school in Chicago. And this is kind of around the time when my parents were going through a divorce. And like in my apartment in Chicago, it was my father, my mother, my Labradoodle, was like my best friend in the world, and me. It's like I didn't have any brothers or sisters, so it's like I kind of come home to, and my mom loved me so much. She never want to show, and I don't want to talk about this too much, but it's like because it's like their relationship also, like kind of
It shaped you. I get it.
pointing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
without
yeah,
getting into
and
it, it shaped you during the
yeah, and it's
process.
like she did such a good job of not trying not to have this turmoil around, but it's like if there's any sense of it, I think we were talking about it, it's like this empathic ability that I was able to sense that there is bad karma, bad energy around. And then since I still didn't have the self-awareness
Mm.
really at all, that it was like a leech and it walking boom, just come on me. And it was like, and then
So you were
maybe
absorbing and getting kind of subsumed by the dynamics and energies around you, it sounds like.
exactly.
So how did you still, right? So without the awareness, if you're in the box, let's help
Yeah.
the audience here from your perspective. How did you, outside of the plant medicine, which we'll talk about in a few subjects, how did you get out of the box? Because that's the dilemma, right? As far
Well, I
as
didn't really get out of the box without the plant medicine, like honestly.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So do you think it's in this? Well, let's preview the topic later because I know you have a different, let's say, philosophy somewhat from me on this because of the care and risks, which we can talk about later in this episode. What would you say that then you do need to have tools? And in other words, is it impossible?
well,
Not impossible.
well,
Is it difficult? More
well, I mean,
difficult?
well,
Yeah.
it's definitely with also now knowing you for a little over a year, and especially the tools that you've given me, the ability to actually ask the right questions within myself and kind of show the light and show the way within, that there are literal, like there is like a literal toolkit to find that inner knowingness and that inner beingness within yourself, without plant medicine and psychedelics. So without you, Haas, without you showing me that, I never knew it. Like I had kind of read, well, so this is interesting. Like I guess when I was 16 or 17, I had this really bad moment where I was like feeling really down. I was like on the floor crying, and I was like in the fetal position, and I
Been there
was
many
like,
times.
yeah, and so I started looking up into like spirituality, like pain and suffering, and then I saw Buddhism, saw the Four Noble Truths, saw the Eightfold Path, and then I was like, well, how long does it take for you to go out and practice? And like what does that process look like for me at this feeling now, feeling horrible, fucking awful? Like where is the next, like how many days? Is it days? Is it weeks? Can I go to India and meditate for a week and be like this Buddha enlightened God and then go out and teach all these other people? No, no, no.
Do you do it?
So
Yeah. How do you
it's like,
do it? The not
yeah,
knowing.
right.
Yeah.
And so it's like I started looking more into it, and it's like, well, some of these meditators say that they can take decades to get to these certain levels of I was like, I don't know if I could do that. Like when I'm growing up in society, of going to like a nice school and being in this city and gentrified and everything, like I just gonna, and actually, no, it's funny, Haas, I actually did ask my mom. I was like, can you maybe help me out and I can go to India and live in an ashram for a couple of years? Literally.
I could have seen you in an ashram, like one of the other umpteenth white guys in India seeking enlightenment since the
Well, actually,
Beatles
you
and
know what's
Ram
funny?
Dass and everybody
You know,
made it famous.
I've actually got to point this guy out. He was a friend of mine at Wesleyan, who actually went to. He literally did that, uh, and so I saw that that wasn't really going to be realistic for me. And then that's kind of when like Jason Silva came back in again, and he was like opening up the mind. I was like kind of getting more excited. I still had the latent trauma, and I think my mind was getting excited. So I was kind of finding, I guess, basically like another clutch that was so good and so nice, but it still wasn't dealing with like the root, like the actual root problem at hand.
I call that mentalizing or mental,
Oh,
masturbation.
that, yeah, you say that.
So
Yeah.
two things for the audience, and I love this flow that we're getting. It's really unpacking things very synchronistically, as is always the case. You allow, right, the surrender and allow, which we will get back to in a moment. You talked about levels of consciousness. So I like David Hawkins' words. For those that don't know, Dr. David Hawkins, MD, PhD in power versus force and The Art of Surrender, Pathways to Letting Go, or Pathways to Surrender. Several books. Brilliant thought leader, spiritual and science at the same time. So as you raise in vibration, everything's energy, everyone. So as you raise in level of consciousness, which then means you have a more expansive, more like higher up on the mountain. So you see more, your vantage point shifts. So Will, you're what you talked about, and I'm grateful. Thank you again for the acknowledgement, and you're always welcome. Is we'll talk about this when we get to the subtopics of the technology and then the plant medicine as they relate to what you're here to do and what your passion is. I was going to cite Sadhguru, who does this inner engineering systems, and I liked him, and I have a similar philosophy. And there's a handful, not to oversimplify it. So to speak to the second point is, so you're saying, had you not gotten access to these, what I call inner energetic systems, it's a very engineering, we have these, whether you've heard of chakras, meridians, pathways, chi, prana, there's various traditions, and now science is showing these pathways exist. So all I've done is I've experienced it, as you know, and I've kind of tapped into my gifts and brought these teachings like Sadhguru and some others. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that. So that's the difficulty that I'm still want to go back to really quickly, because it's almost like this paradoxical aurora boreas, I think.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the awareness and you're in the box of mental cage, as we're calling it, that you called it that earlier in this episode, and I wrote that down. How do you or as another friend says, a former executive from Microsoft says, she said to me once, Haas, you can't see the ingredients from inside the bottle. You can't, when you're having a subjective experience, you can't see objectively. So if you hadn't met me, let's take me out and the plant medicine out. Can you give any tips for how you then said, you know what? Because that's the bridge from who you think you are to who you actually are, your actual pure energy, not your conditioned, traumatized energy. That bridge is faith, trust, surrender.
I think what it comes back to is like even kind of where I was starting with, or it's like go with the flow, and that there was like the spiritual teacher I saw was like, let the day take you, almost not to like be in a victim where you let it, like be a prisoner to culture in that sense, but literally go with the flow. Like, and yeah, to kind of feel where even our kind of those desires come from, and to then actually like to manifest those desires is actually kind of this letting go, this inner paradoxical inner letting go, because it's like, well, it's something I want to have, I want it, you want it, you're not going to get it. Like when you accept the not going to get it, and then that's like Bob Marley was also like, when you don't need it, then that's when the universe will give it to you, because it's like, oh, I'm content now, I'm happy, like look at everything, it's already okay, like and then the universe literally feels that, because you're emulating this universal abundance, and so it's like, oh, and then it's like love is emulating out, so then it's like I then can love myself, and then I can go out and have a lovely conversation with a friend and have a deeply insightful and meaningful connection. And only until I can actually surrender. And surrender to the ego and the man it's seen as a threat. It's seen as something that is like going against that construct of being a masculine and like being this tough alpha male mentality, which only creates borders, and it only literally creates walls.
It's more constructs, more in those mental cage. It's more bars in the mental cage, essentially. Every time you create an identity construct, it's a bar in your cage. Let's call it that. That's what's coming through. Yeah,
that's brilliant.
I think you're addressing so many layers of the conditioning impeccably, being a young, American, frat, college environment, family culture, and then gender identity constructs, right? And then societal programming around that. So what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like you went from overlooking your feelings to accepting your feelings.
That's very true.
As oversimplified as it seems.
And
I'm very
that's
much
very true. And that's very true. And as even dark and bad as those feelings may be, to feel them, to truly feel them. And even feeling the bad emotions can actually, in a weird way, kind of feel good, because it's like, oh, like I'm feeling like myself again, even though it may not be this enlightened state that I experience sometimes on psychedelics. It's like, this is me. This is me. And it's coming back to me. And it's like the baby, it's like that inner child that is like, well, why aren't you paying attention to me anymore?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, all this conditioning came up, and it's like, I'm back. Like, and it's this kind of this like rekindling, and yeah, like kind of like a reunion.
Mm. Well, yoga means union. I love that, because you're alluding to shadow work, what they call in various industries shadow work, which is, this analogy of we accumulate density, shadow, lower vibrational energies. And I love what you said, even if it's, you didn't say it this way, even if it's icky, even if it feels, like this is so dense, it's feeling and creating space for it all, which is this notion of when we say acceptance, what do we mean precisely at a very practical level? It means like open up your awareness, your body, all of it. Open your mind, open your heart, open your body, open your energy to allow whatever wants to come up, because it is us, right? Well, that we trap it, we keep it in this cage, and then energy, quantum physically, wants to naturally flow. So healing is a choice. Harmony is a choice, as you've learned.
It really is. Yeah. And to go off that real quick, like Naveen Jain is like an entrepreneur who I look up to. He's like, happiness is a choice. Like there are 10 reasons to be happy. Wake up in the morning, there's 10 reasons to be happy or 10 reasons to be sad. You choose whether that be, and then that'll be your day.
It's all a choice, right? Because if that goes back to I'm not the dance, I am the dance, not the dancer. Because that's you are responsible for creating this holographic reality, which science has proved, which I know we're going to get to very much in the subtopics. So this is interesting. So I like that you're speaking to these and demonstrating very organically and inspired why the basis for the show. In the first season, we called it the Dark Night. That's shadow work. That's the, you have to pull the weeds, as I'm calling it now, to plant the garden. You can't plant the garden if you got weeds. If you got shit, you got to get the shit out of your system in order to be able to do and plant the garden and be your true self. So going back to this topic, to wrap this first topic of your transformation, it sounds like what you really shifted from is the mental to the heart-centered. And we're talking about how you took those steps, surrendering to all the feelings, accepting all the feelings, even if they're shadowy, making space for it all, realizing you're the dance, not the dancer, getting out of conditioning, spells, identity loops. All of that dissipates. All of that goes away on its own if you choose for it to. If you don't take part in that, right? So that's good.
Yeah. And it's weird because like it's like there is this other side, and then like to not, it is almost like being in like a prison cell, kind of like what I was saying before. And like the psychology of prisoners actually sometimes then will feel like they deserve it. And then it's like a weird, then cyclical thing that can even turn more and more negative. And Eckhart Tolle, I believe, was saying that he had one of his readers reach out to him and say that he read his book while he was in prison.
Wow.
And like, and like after reading the book, he was like, now I feel free. Like I can be literally in a jail cell and know I'll be in here for the rest of my life and be free from the mind. Like, it's like, oh my God. Like,
Viktor Frankl said something. So there's so many great mystics, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. Very beautiful. Wow. So I'm curious, Will, you spoke to this and we're not slowly, I should erase that judgmental phrase. We're getting methodically through then most of the subtopics of the initial topic. Can you tell I'm a lawyer? Subtopic A, subtopic C. You talked earlier about flow, positive psychology flow, not to diss any of the colleagues that do that work. I think that's still looking at it in a very I'm trying to fit it in a box so people don't think you're woo-woo or out there, because what we really are learning now is some of the crazy fringe stuff is accurate, and we need to get rid of the societal programming around this, which plant medicine is going to be later in the show. There's this notion of, you talked about this oneness consciousness, and the first time we spoke, ladies and gentlemen, he had what I call an endogenous, or maybe saying the biological term wrong, internal self-produced DMT, which is a chemical in your brain that your pineal gland, a part of your brain, secretes, which correlates in mysticism, science, we're only learning about it now, to higher states of consciousness, along with other bio, brain chemistry, neurochemistry. He actually had one. I'm an expert at this consciousness work, and I can with or without the plant medicine. So literally, he had it, this initial meeting I'm talking about, through the neck carrying meeting him and I met at. And so talk to us as best as you can. And there's a famous Persian mystic from the town I was actually born in, Sadi. And he says that the rose garden, there's a famous quote that was actually translated by a guy from Boston, where he went to university or college. And it's something along the lines of this, paraphrasing it, is I went to the rose garden. The rose garden is this state of oneness consciousness that Sadi, this Persian mystic, is talking about. I went to that state, that rose garden, my friends, to bring you back some roses so you can smell their fragrance. When I went there, the smell and fragrance of the divine empowered me that I forgot and lost myself.
I love that.
And I'm sorry, I back empty-handed. So like every sage, right? Moses ascends the mountain and he comes back. Well, Moses is a bad example. He came with 2 stone tablets, allegedly, in that philosophy and in that historical. Outside of Moses as a bad analogy that I chose on the spot, most mystics come back empty-handed. Most enlightened beings come back empty-handed, because it is a state of nothingness. So with all that prefaced, as best as you can, Sadi couldn't do it. Let's see if William can do it. I sense you can. How would you explain the sensation of oneness consciousness to somebody who's never tasted that wine of the mystic, as they call it, that divine consciousness, that oneness consciousness, that flow state? Now, this is not, there's normal flow, last preface, there's normal flow and there's super flow. Is, again, we're creating more terms, more, it's all one. Let's forget tomato. It's higher state of flow, higher state of conscious, higher frequency of flow. We're talking about this really high frequency.
I think a good way to think about it is like when you look at a tree, if you try to look at a tree, and immediately when you look at a tree, what are, like, from a conditioned mind, there's going to be a lot of thoughts like, oh, that's a tree. That is a thing. Like, and oh, it has these branches, and look at the leaves, look at the color of it. Oh, how old is that tree? Wait, why am I looking at a tree? Shouldn't I be like working? Like, and so like when, like you're saying, that no thing.
Don't talk to
yeah, it's like it's like that when there is that no thingness, when there is the silence, like when there's literally silence in the mind, there is this feeling of this inner connectedness, like, wow, that tree is so beautifully still that it feels like it's...
Unpack it for the audience. So now that you're getting into that state, because I can see you getting there, how do you feel in your body? So what does it sense? Give it flavor.
Yeah, it's like this tinglingness that's like that comes up like almost in the spine, like a kundalini type awakening, where it's like going up. Yeah, exactly.
SF, the cerebral spinal fluid. It's all biological current.
Yeah. It's like going up. Yeah, it's like those little signals are like going up, and then there's like this feeling where like I can almost feel the tree as if it were me, which to the mind, which to the mind is not possible to conceive, and
but I'm me. but I'm me, and those that know me know what I mean with disjunctives. But just anyways, keep going.
And so it's like that.
How do you stop yourself from saying I'm not the tree? Real quick, keep flowing. Stop yourself. Seriously, keep flowing.
Yeah, literally, like that. I am the tree, actually, in this unified way, where
you allow the frequency, you allow the perception, you allow the...
I'm trying to like see if there's some like metaphor, like in
Yeah,
everyday.
sadly, like I said, it's a hard thing to do, to put into subjective phraseology and objective.
Yeah. Like what I'm trying to think is like my own subjective experiences, like how I can tie that in, like me playing squash or something like that. Like when I'm so, like, or for example, like the racket is like a part of me. Or you could even, I mean, we could even get kind of techno in the sense of where they're then using, like putting on these robotic legs and then they can put in these sensories. It's like, it's like, then where is the me? If it can all be pseudo created or artificially created, then where is the I? Like, where is that coming from? Like,
So it's an
it's,
I beyond the I, right? It's a
yeah.
greater you, a greater state of you, or what you said originally, this unique vibe, right? This unique true self. Be your true self. That true self is limited, and it's like almost
Yeah.
like you're trying to put it yourself into a
Yeah.
tighter outfit, and we're all uncomfortable,
Yeah.
distress, dissonance,
Yeah.
detraumatized, and we're like, oh, like I really don't like this. Are you happy? Well, and then right, we overlook it and we're all like, oh, we're good, we're good,
Right.
we're good, I'm
Right.
good. We're supposed to be like this, right? This is what, like, your frat days. This is
Yeah.
this is normal.
Yeah.
Everybody's
Yeah.
know any better. Nobody's showing the other way. Nobody's
Yeah.
aware
Yeah.
of the
And
unaware.
yeah, and like to what you're saying, there actually, I don't think there is a way to actually describe it, because all we can do is we can only use language to point to
Yeah.
a state that exists within ourselves, right? It's not something that we can say and we'll point out that light bulb, but that's it, like that. Like
Maybe that's why the Chinese and the
where
Taoist tradition say that a teacher doesn't show you what to see, shows you where to look.
yeah.
So
Well,
that
we
I
could
think of that right now, and I think, oh, that's
yeah,
maybe
that's
why mystic teachers, masters, whatever you're gonna call it, go that. And why Sadi said, "Hey, I couldn't bring the rose fragrance back. I can tell you it's a
yeah.
rose fragrance, and that's the garden. Go there." And I love what you said. Brilliant, bro. I mean, you're so freaking tuned in. It's in the garden. It's a subjective, dualistic paradox in a way, because it's like you want to go out, you want to go up, you want to seek divine, God, source, consciousness, oneness, the 0 point field if you're agnostic. Go in to go out.
Yeah. I mean, and I think like what some Zen masters will do as well, it's like they're like sitting in a if they have like a classroom or something like that, they'll say like, well, the students will say like, so now what? It's like, well, pay attention. And then they'll put up their finger like, pay attention, like that. And then if you do want to get into kind of the plant medicine stuff, Terrence would be like,
Terrence, say the full
like
name. Terrence who? Terrence.
Terrence McKenna, yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
So Terrence McKenna and be like, well, imagine us as like these primordial apes just standing around. We're in the Amazon, and we're like hanging around this tree, and then we look up at this like forbidden fruit, right? And we look up at this fruit and say, like, yeah, that's it. Like, I can't tell you what it is, but that. It's kind of the same thing. It's like there, but it's something that you have to be willing to start the self-inquiry within yourself and starting to go within, like only until you have the capacity to ask the question, because again, as the question is then opening up the energetic frequency and then literally a portal into this other electromagnetic spectrum that we can perceive. I mean, there's like, we only perceive 1 in 1 trillion
Bingo.
of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? And so to think that you could ask a question that could open you up to that is like,
You had to exercise your will. I'm full of puns and double entendre. You had to exercise your will. You said it very brilliantly, and I'm making a pun out of it, because William had to exercise his divine will. Each of us have a choice. Healing's a choice. We're peppering it in throughout. It all comes back to synthesize it. That you had to choose and say, I'm going to will by asking. Then you take this intention through the exercise of will, and then you do things. Now that's where people stop. I think that people stop because they don't know they have the choice. They don't realize they are the dance, not the dancer. They realize they don't have their power back. They're in victim first season stuff. And then 2, it's this notion of then is it going to work? Is it going to disbelieve? They disbelieve the magic or the divine or the algorithm or the energetic spectrum, as you put it. And then so it's really, then you have to then take that step, and then you're like, and then allow, accept, allow. Then you don't have to do much. Did you have to do much once you started it, or was it like almost like dominoes and it like started to unpack shit upon shit?
Exactly. Like it's like that flow where you don't really have to do anything. If you can be and let it happen, it will happen like that.
So talk to me, last point before we wrap up on your transformational journey, and then I want to know how it shaped you, which takes us then to what are you doing now, which is this two topics of technology, and specifically for you, I know it's crypto, blockchain, and how to use that for collective ascension, how to raise our collective, the new earth for humanity, and then the other plant medicine and consciousness engineering. I know that's how it shaped you because I know you. To preview it for the audience. Before we get to those two topics that we're alluding to and have already started to brush synchronistically, finish this up on this topic, because I think this will help us wrap up your transformational journey and then add in anything else as we've been flowing. You said you had to have love to give love early on. Talk to us about, because that's so much what I was seeking to. It was this notion of like, I'm a lover. I'm a hopeful romantic. Notice the reframe. I don't say hopeless. Be careful of the word you use. Be careful. Pay attention. Pay attention. So I'm a hopeful romantic, and so I know we've talked about this a little bit, and again, I'm putting you on the spot, as most of the episode is unscripted in that way. What was your love journey in terms of both self-love and then other love? Because I think it's a big point. You have to have love to give love. You can't be an empty well and try to pour out, something you don't have. And I think that's a disconnect.
Of course,
we all have.
Yeah.
I think many of us are addicted to genetically modified love, and we've never had organic, gluten-free, vegan love. To the analogy, we've had pesticide-ridden love, and we've taken it as, this is the best kind of love, yo. This is the good shit. This is the good love. Everybody, I love my wife. I love my kids. And then you're posed with conditions, and then you realize, whoa, that's not unconditional love. That's not the highest spectrum of love. Whoa, what if there's more to love than I know because of the mental cage? Talk to us about how, when you got out of the mental cage, what did you learn about love? Love.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because
go ahead.
before, like when you look at positive psychology and self-help gurus, a lot of them is like really the thoughts of what you're telling yourself to be true. Like, what are the thoughts in your mind? Is it positively like things that you want to go and grow and help other people and mutually beneficial for humanity, or is it like dark and like insecure and like self-conscious type thoughts? And self-esteem and spirituality is really interesting. Like like I could say, oh, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, and that may not make me feel better like that, and it probably won't, make me feel better.
I feel better.
It's like, so to go inside, and like I was saying before, me, I think it may be this generational thing that I've inherited from lifetimes ago, like that it kind of is in like the gut and intestines. So it's like when I can actually really feel the internal organs inside of my body and feel like what does that really feel like. And then when you feel it, there's like this energetic flow that happens because you're bringing awareness to energy, so that when your mind, there is this like dualism connection where mainstream conventional science doesn't think that the mind and body is connected. Guess what? It is. Like, and when you can bring this clairvoyance to it, then you can bring up the energy from the intestines or liver, the kidney, the lungs, and even your genitals, like to then go out and procreate. It's like this connection, mind, body, dualism, non-dualism that has to come together. So to get to what you're saying about this feeling of self-love and self-worthiness and feeling like it's okay, like I'm home, right? Like I'm home in the heart. Like, and kind of what I was saying before is like, wherever you go, there you are. Like whatever emotions you're bringing with yourself, there you are. Like I could go to Mars and could still feel, I still am the same being. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not until you actually can feel the emotions, like, and actually feel all of it, and to feel that it hurt, and it can hurt because we all have trauma inside of us, and we all have yeah, generational trauma that we have inherited from lifetimes ago, that until we can like feel where that's coming from, then only then can we, like I was saying, like let it flow in this biophysical process where we can then feel the emotion to then start releasing it and start to let it flow outwardly, let it. So then that's like
Let
the
it
kind
move
of
on.
alchemical, yeah, like that's the alchemical healing process where crying is such a natural thing to happen, to let us feel, to actually let us feel. And then but the ego doesn't like to cry, and men especially don't want to be seen as crying because that's like the victim type thing. And
Well, that's that.
uh,
Let's unpack this, because you're in your
yeah,
infinite wisdom. You may not
yeah,
have noticed how much
yeah,
potent science, neuroscience, somatosensory, trauma
yeah,
informed
and
research.
yeah, and like all these contradictories, that all these contradictory beliefs of what the ego and masculine should believe. They shouldn't hold up this. But then I had this spiritual awakening saying that I am the dance. The
Mhm.
ego is saying that I'm the dancer. So which do I believe?
So
Well,
let's
don't
pause.
listen to,
Yeah, let's
yeah,
pause real quick, because
yeah,
this is the point. So 4 systems, everybody, for those new to any of this, 4 systems. You have an energy system. You have a mental system, hence neuroscience and the mind itself. You have a heart system, hence neuroscience and heart math and many neurobiology showing we have a brain in the heart. And then we have also a biophysical system, 4 systems that make up the whole of who we are. You alluded to, when I asked, how did you know you didn't know how to love? You go to this very brilliant point that we keep coming back to. And in the first season, we had Tanya talk about this in healing, is what we call interoception in science, the ability to take your awareness into your body, your inner awareness, your ability to feel your organs, feel it. Why? Because many of us, as William is saying, and his own experience has shown, is that it's dross or stuck energy. The bioelectricity, the energy is not flowing in biophysical form. One of the 4 systems is stuck, usually, if not many of the 4 systems. So the whole biofunctional, this is called biofunctional healing or biofunctional medicine. The whole biofunction is desensitized. You don't even know what feeling is, which goes to your point of overlooking feeling, right? So it sounds like then what you did is you had to resensitize by bringing your mind and awareness into your body, and then feeling that home is where your heart is, back to heart-centered leadership.
absolutely,
And it's safe to feel, because you touch on that, right? The men.
yeah,
So is
yeah.
that encapsulating this
That's
part?
so true, because the conditioning will tell us that it's not good to feel. The conditioning is saying that you shouldn't feel, and you should dissociate and go take a
Well,
drink
that's how you
or
heal.
buy something.
Correct.
Like,
Well, on the
yeah,
side, that's what I'm saying. The practical, see,
yeah.
this is where I think the link needs to be made, and that's why I'm pausing us to fill in some blanks, so to speak, contextually. Is that's the link that needs to be made. Most people think, oh, this is simply you gotta feel. No, no, no. There's a actual bioenergetic interplay. I don't like to say mind body only, because we leave out the heart, mind, heart, body. The software, everybody, the 4 system, the software is the heart and the mind. The program is the soul. The hardware is the body. The software has to work in conjunction with the hardware, and then the soul overlights it all, right? So there's this notion that William's talking about, which is like you have to actually go into the other systems and see what's stuck, and then open it back up.
Yeah.
And so that's really really interesting that you say that. And then the other thing, which funny enough, in the Chinese zodiac, you're a tiger, and one of my attorney friends, AJ, said this at one of my early trainings 4 years ago. He said, I've done a lot of advanced work. We have a mutual friend who is Shaq's coach, and a very well-connected coach, personal, transformative. And he said, working with Jeff Haas, this friend AJ, who's your Chinese year, a tiger as I call it, he said to me, as an attorney buddy, he said, I came to your workshop, and affirmational work I'd done with Jeff, it landed differently because of, I think, the point you brought up, I feel like, which is many people, they try to think it away. And where the energies, the energy gets stuck in the heart usually, and the body, those 2 systems down here. So we're going up here, back into the cage, and we're going, and then everybody's like, how come I still feel stuck? How come I still, I'm taking plant medicine or drinking, or am I still numb, or how come I have chronic pain? Or so, okay, so you had this, you open up, you feel your insides, you feel home is your heart, you're safe to feel, you realized, and this is another thing real quick, and I know you're giving us so much, I want to contextualize, put it in amalgamized form and make sure I'm hearing you correctly, is what source are you creating from as a leader? You also unpack that for us, which is part of a lot of what I teach, is where are you creating from? Are you creating from the pain, or are you creating from the love? And that's where you have to feel and not be numb to know where you're coming from.
That's so true.
You didn't know you were unpacking this for the audience. That's why I had to slow you down, Tiger, and be like, whoa, 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 bro, let's explain all the infinite wisdom you're bringing up. So now, at this point, to wrap this up and then get to your mission and calling, because wow, we're good. This is going to be one of those long ones, which I like. Sometimes if you're new to these, they can be an hour. They could be an hour and 45. If we're flowing, we're jamming. We be jamming.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
You brought up Bob.
I love it. I love it. Yes.
So real quick on love. So once
Yeah.
you felt, what was the rest of your journey in relation to love? Because you obviously are talking about the junk and the desensitization.
Yeah, it's like it's being aware of the non-dualism and dualism at play together in the world of form and the world of formlessness. That love in the world of form is usually very superficial. Like I say, I love you, Haas. Well, do I actually love you, or do I love how you make me feel?
Well, there's love and like, and I think I used to mistake the two. So yeah, keep going. We mistake like.
And to truly love something or someone is to let them be free, and to want that, and to not even to project, to want them to be happy, to love them as they are, like to truly accept and love the fish as it is, and not want to add anything else to it or want to fix anything else, but to truly love it as it is. Like, this is magnificent. This being is alive. I mean, the beauty of life itself is so magical. You know, when we can actually acknowledge that, oh my God, there is this infinite amount of beauty inside of this thing. But when the mind comes in and saying, oh yeah, you're kind of pretty, you're kind of cool like that, it's like
the mind filters it, doesn't it?
Yeah, the mind, yeah.
The mind boxes it in, limits it, it parcels the spectrum, to use your verbiage.
Literally.
You can get this much love and energy and light, or you can choose this much through this myopic, this is all I know of love. All I know of love. This is love. This is love, right?
Yeah.
And then all the while we're complaining, I don't have enough grace. Where's grace? Where's love? Where's all that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Another good quote, I guess, is like that. Like, when you're grateful, you're happy. You can't say that, oh, I'm happy. Like, when you're grateful and can say that, oh, I'm blessed. Like, again, like kind of how happiness is a choice in a way. It's like, well, first being grateful and to saying like, wow, I can sleep on a bed. I have a pillow. I can wake up and I have a toothbrush. I can eat a banana. Like, that is like, oh my God, I'm blessed. And then with that feeling of blessed, this feeling of generosity and giving, and that's like exuding this love, which is the inner happiness. So happiness is interesting. Like, yeah, it's feeling like the beingness, like, because I feel like happiness can kind of be like the roller coaster thing where I'm like, for me, it's like, I'm not happy all the time. Like, the spiritual practice is to be content, to accept and acknowledge what is. Exactly. Yeah. Like the what isness almost. And then there are certain moments where there's even more gratitude, where then the happiness will really shine and exude. So to know that there are, like, the emotions go in these wavelengths, and so to find the medium and to find the balance, I don't think balance is good word, because balance implies a trade-off. Like, to find the harmony is to still feel yourself, and that feeling yourself within yourself is the contentment, because you are it.
Holding the duality, the opposites, is I'm having this human experience, I'm still okay. I still have the divinity. Most people think because I still have work to do, I'm not complete, I'm not divine, I'm not whole. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
no, you're both at the same time. Well, how could that be? Your mind is
yeah,
telling you you're not,
yeah.
therefore
The mind,
limiting.
yeah, the mind is always so hard on itself. Like it's like,
Who's
well,
this
why couldn't I do better? Why aren't I more spiritual? Like,
so many woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? So
yeah.
your transformation with all of this, unconditioning, unprogramming, to use that verbiage now, how did it shape you? How does this then lead us to, it seems like the theme you naturally brought up earlier is, I've never heard you say this is what you do per se, is how do we enhance human potential? Because I wrote human potential.
Yeah,
How does
absolutely.
that dovetail to
Uh,
what those two passions are, technology
yeah,
and consciousness engineering through plant medicine?
yeah. So like,
Mhm.
how can we make a world in which people are actually free to be themselves? I mean, how do we create a
Mm.
world where people can go out and do the things that they want to do without the confines and systems that other people put onto them? Like, and it can, what I'm saying can be seen as anarchism or like an egalitarian view of the world. And I would much rather stick with that than a dictator world that we live in predominantly in many parts of the world, that I'd even say our governments are dictators, because it's like based on their inner beliefs about themselves, then they create these external systems that other people
It's an
should live in.
extension, right? It's an extension. The
Yeah,
rules are an
yeah,
extension of what they believe. If
yeah.
they're sick or if they're traumatized, they're going to create traumatic systems. Here's the question: when you say I don't think we have to necessarily to pause real quick. Sorry to keep pausing. Is this notion of I think we should got to be careful here again, not to let the mind interfere with the binary of it, of
Yeah,
what it has to be. And our, I think maybe the
yeah,
words
yeah,
don't have,
yeah.
because it sounds like what you're talking about, because you said it earlier, portal, dimensionality. It sounds like you're bringing in, because we're all responsible, and this is one of the themes of the show. We're all going to be responsible. Those of us that are going to be leading this leadership ascension that's underway, hence the theme, is this notion of we're all going to be responsible for aspects of society that gets reformed, transformed, reshaped, built out, whatever you want to call it.
Mm.
So it seems like you're going to bring something in, or you're birthing something there. So talk to me about that. Not so much. So now that you've painted the vision, the world, your vision, if I'm hearing you correctly, is a world where
Yeah, and yeah, and
free to be themselves, a world
yeah,
where everyone
well,
is free to be.
yeah, and to put a word to what you're saying is
Yeah.
like a world where our consciousness is decentralized.
Ooh.
So in a
Now
way to
take us
even,
to crypto, because I do know that much about
yeah,
crypto and blockchain that's decentralized.
but I think that also pertains and should then pertain into spirituality, because like a
Mm.
centralized consciousness is the confines of the ego and the construct and what we think of ourselves to be, which is like, what we've been talking about this whole time, is such a limited way of being, that if it's this central thing, that if it's central, that means that it's that, and it's only that, and then it creates all these rules and guidelines of way of being around that, and that's static. And guess what? Evolution always wins, and things change, and the impermanence of life and nature doesn't care what you think about it. It's still impermanent, or literally nothing lasts like that. So if there is a way that we could look out into the world and be the only way to be is to be in a world where our systems of consciousness are decentralized. So it's like right now the world that we live at is like a reflection of everyone's inner state. So we see a lot of chaos, war, crime, pollution, pandemic, and and so when we can still accept what is and accept that this is where we're at, then we can see that, well, maybe we don't want this to be how we want to end up. Like, and and we don't really know. I wouldn't say that, I would go so far as to say that humans don't know the solutions. Like me, it's best to come from a place of not knowing, right? Like to ask the right questions. That's the most revolutionary part to help us evolve, is because it's pointing to a truth that we're still overlooking. And then it's not binary, like where it's, oh yeah, right, only this or that, like that, it's a spectrum. And to point to now, what Terence McKenna talked about is that this digitally fabricated world is waking up, like literally, that the world is now waking up where literally a machine is going out and creating an NFT, which for the viewers that don't know is like a certain type of cryptographic token, which is like a non-fungible token. So basically any physical material
So before you get there,
asset.
before you
Yeah.
get there, because now we're at this topic, start with my question that I have to ask you, because I don't know anything about crypto and the very little he's tried to explain to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, phew. And if I don't get it at my consciousness level, I'm sure that many audience members are going to get it. So give us the crypto one-on-one, because it seems like we're now, you see this vision for the world where we can all be our free selves, decentralized currency, which, you know, made me interject, oh, that's like blockchain. So crypto 101, because this seems to be one of your passions,
Yeah.
flow of
Yeah.
energy, which is how do we use technology, specifically your, what's the name of it again? The name of the new business you started?
Oh gosh. Oh.
Gasho. So while talking about Gasho, which seems to be how your transformational journey led you to this vision of the world, Gasho is one arm. Before you explain what Gasho does and the tech
Yeah.
collective tech for collective ascension, explain all of this. Not too detailed, high level.
Yeah. I mean, blockchain is basically, think about it as digital information locked up in packet, in a basically like a packet, like a digital packet.
Okay.
That packet gets secured by something called cryptography, which is
Okay.
like zeros and ones, and it's like SHA 256 bit and different types of proof of work.
Okay, so
which is
different
what,
ways it's coded. Is that what you're saying?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, different ways.
So computer coded is what you're saying.
Yeah, basically encrypted. Yeah.
Okay. Hence cryptocurrency. Is that what you're saying? So it's making sense to me when you unpack it. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And literally packets. It's funny you say that. Yeah. Because that is like kind of the, yeah, it's like a packet of information that then gets tied up. And then it gets like tied up into one block that then gets tied up into the next, right? It gets linked
like
to then the next block, right?
Like linked together?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. By these cryptographic encryption algorithms. That was basically a consensus mechanism. So the idea is to find consensus. So like,
explain that. You mean everybody agreed in the world, this is how we're going to put our packets?
well, so the only, so yeah, so within each block that's then linked into another block, which then creates a blockchain, there are transactions inside of a single block. And for a transaction to actually process, it has to be validated by a node, and the node is like a miner, where a miner basically solves a cryptographic puzzle. And then as soon as they get solved, so basically like in a good, like, so basically a Bitcoin, 6.25 blocks are minted, right? So there are 21 million Bitcoin total. There's 18
in the world, there's 21 million.
Yeah, there's a fixed supply.
Go slow, because I'm new, and the audience is probably gonna be new to this. Some maybe geeks out there that do this work.
Yeah.
So if you are following and you know this stuff, I don't. Hence, this is the look I make when I'm learning. It's kind of like a look. So well, hold on, go slow, because I want to learn this for my own sake as well as the audience. So minted, like currency is minted. So you're saying when it's created, because they're trying to create fungible, that's the word you use, which is a finance term, an actual form-based fiat. Right? Form-based fiat. Good thing I studied international law, geopolitics, finance, healing, medicine, mysticism, Swiss Army life, you know, Renaissance. So am I with you so far? So you have fungible. You said that word. I want to clarify. So it's minted. There's 20 million. How many total in the world that's been created? Say it again.
There's 21 million Bitcoin.
Correct. So where we were in your analysis was, or explanation was, of what is blockchain crypto is, so then it's minted, and then you're explaining how it's confirmed by a miner. Unpack.
Right. So basically,
hold on. Let me, for the audience, because I'm keeping it together live.
Yeah.
Creators creates it, software codes it, cryptography, packets together. You with me so far? That's minted. Now we're at the phase of what the heck is a miner and nodes and blah blah blah. Now we're there for the audience and my sake. So
then so each person has like there's a public key that's then gets that is available to anyone. That so all transactions are actually sent on something called Etherscan. So like when you saw, if you heard of Vitalik donating like $1 billion worth of Shiba Inu, which is
None
a
of this.
coin, you could see that transaction on Etherscan. So you can then that transaction. So this is an example of what I'm saying. Yeah.
Public.
So when that transaction gets broadcasted to the network, that 1 billion Shiba Inu has to be validated through these cryptographic puzzles that these other nodes, which are miners who are running either GPU whole setup, like a mining rig, then they basically validate that consensus mechanisms and they see, yeah.
Okay, so minted, created, coded, minted,
Mhm.
blocked, blah, blah, blah here. Sorry to over blah, blah, blah it. And here, so it's interesting. So it's broadcast, hence the accountability and the consensus. Everybody in the world sees these transactions. So hold on.
Yeah.
So it's like a hub. Then you're telling me then another party has to certify it. So this
Absolutely.
is now how you keep checks and balances, I see, which is
Yeah.
how do you know somebody's not creating BS? Okay, so instead of blockchain, they're creating BS. So then they have to mine it to verify it. It seems like from these cryptography puzzles, and then it's in circulation. Is that the lifespan of blockchain?
Yeah, that's what, yeah. So
Wow, that was easy. How long did that take us? Let's see. All right, here on the Vulnerable Power Show, Season 2, we broke down one of the world's most complex quantum technologies in about 6 or 7 minutes in a very rudimentary fashion. I got to say, so giving you an attaboy. We did pretty good for my noob butt to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Wikipedia never explained it as well as Wikipedia did.
But they actually are moving to quantum proof. Like it will be eventually quantum proof. So like right now, like if there, so basically Bitcoin is like the first peer-to-peer digital currency. Well, actually eCash was created in the 80s, but it never had any type of adoption. And then the Bitcoin white paper was released by the pseudonym of Miss Satoshi Nakamoto, who we still don't know. Some people may think it's Hal Finney. And then the second biggest cryptocurrency was released. The white paper was released in the fall of 2013. So that was called Ethereum. And Ethereum is more so like that. Ethereum now is actually the first programmable money. So Bitcoin doesn't. So there's this new concept in Ethereum called smart contracts.
Oh, legal. Now you're talking about legal innovation.
Yeah.
Hey, another passion that'll be on this season. Okay, keep going. All right.
So, and so the idea is then you can actually like self-execute these codes that can work onto any type of self-executing agreement like insurance, real estate, finance. I mean, that's why then we see that there's so much interest now into decentralized finance.
The applicability of this technology and the way it could be applied to reformat.
Exactly.
Format, transform, take system and reformat. So talk to me about what your passion is over at Gasho. So then how did your this ties now, let's bring it all together on this first passion point of Gasho and using technology, specifically crypto, for collective ascension. Unpack.
Yeah, I truly believe that we can give people the tools to empower themselves, but at the end of the day, people empower themselves. Like people empower themselves. And that, I think that is like a binary truth where like, it's almost so much as like people heal themselves until they can accept the truth for themselves and then feel that, then they can emulate that they have then gotten this wisdom and then can share that with others like that. So our massively transformative purpose is to truly illuminate the abundance and sovereignty that these technologies can offer. So we also want to bring in this spiritual guidance as well. And so the reason why I chose the name Gasho, it's actually a Buddhism term for reverence and respect of life.
I didn't know that. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like having this feeling of like this acceptance and immense amount of gratitude and reverence for life. And that now there, for the first time in humanity, someone can create a bank, their own virtual bank in cyberspace, and take control of their wealth like that, where they're not then confined to the banks wherever they are, the government.
How? Explain. Okay, so pause. Unpack this, because again, for me, I'm like, wait, how did you make the leap from they make their own bank from crypto? Explain that. Link that.
Yeah. So now, like for example, like in an Ethereum like ecosystem, if you were to like download a wallet and you have,
Which is where your coins would be held, right? Your currency would be held in your wallet. It'd be a
in a
cyber,
wallet,
it'd be online.
and or like an exchange. So like let's say if you heard of like Coinbase, so they had that IPO of like $140 billion.
So that's an exchange versus a wallet. Okay. All right.
So, well, they both tie in together because like if you go out to Coinbase and then you buy ETH, for example,
Ethereum. Okay.
the
Don't
native.
nicknames for me and the
Well,
other.
no, well, ETH is the native coin for Ethereum. So
Ah.
Ethereum is not a coin itself. Like that's why I need to draw the distinction for a second that
Yeah.
Ethereum is like a general purpose blockchain where like Bitcoin is like a Swiss Army knife, where you were saying it's like a Swiss Army knife, that Ethereum is like a, you know, a multi-purpose
Correct.
toolkit.
Or
Yeah.
the
So then
tech, and then ETH is the coin using that tech. Is that?
yeah, it's like digital oil to fuel the whole ecosystem like that.
Ooh, I love that. So
Right.
blockchain is one form of fuel or oil to create blockchain currency. Ethereum is another type of, it's a fuel or in that way.
Exactly.
Wow,
Well, literally, because again, these miners have to then validate that, and then they get rewarded for that. So, for example, like when Bitcoin is first released, if you validate a block, that's you get a rewarded 50 Bitcoin. I mean, at the peak, you know, I mean, at the peak, that's $300,000, and so
wow. Okay. This is making more sense. This is, I mean, not only does it
yeah,
explain your passion for the world, it's very informative for what is
yeah,
very
and so
misunderstood technology.
so so what to get back to what I was saying is like
Yes,
the
please.
ability to set up your own bank account in cyberspace and then take control of your wealth is basically, if you open like an app like Coinbase, where then you can um or BlockFi rather, is a big company now that's opening up this lending, so where you can own like ETH, Bitcoin, Uni, Mana, these different coins, and have them in their wallet. So there's different types of wallets. We can get into more of that as well.
Keep it high
Okay,
level.
yeah,
Yeah, we can get to
yeah. So yeah, um, and basically giving the user the ability to earn interest on these digital assets. Well, before, to earn interest, I mean, or to even go out and to be able to lend, I can lend to someone without ever actually going into like an agreement with them. Now it can be done by code, where smart contracts can validate it, where I don't even ever have to meet the person.
So it's efficient, and there's
So
no intermediaries or gatekeepers, which can be corrupted. Obviously, there is talk of, we won't badmouth any industries, banksters. There are certain industries that come back to this point. They're coming from a more fearful, scarce source, and that's what they're extending and creating out. Their pain, their talks, their overlooked issues are being projected into these systems. It sounds like. So
yeah,
this is what you mean by
and a big thing about this is that like it cannot be corrupted. So like before, so like every node on the network like actually has a copy of the digital ledger, like I was saying. So then to add a transaction, every node needs to check its validity.
Mm. It's
And then
self-regulating is what it sounds like from a legal perspective. As a lawyer,
sounds like what?
it's self-regulating is what it sounds
Yeah,
like.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then it really promotes like a more transparency, and then it like allows it to be like corruption proof.
Now,
Um,
what's funny is for the audience, if you are listening and you're in the finance industry, I love you. We are going to have another soul brother, Yogi Banker, Scott, who's going to be on the show. Two finance soul brother and sister are going to be on this season. So I was joking. I tease a lot if you're new to me. So if you're listening and you're a sensitive finance person, I was teasing when I joked about banksters. So they're every industry. God knows in every industry there's the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Make fun of the industry. So I was teasing to clarify. So okay, so crypto Gasho, why this? Why? Where did the
Yeah.
why and how the why?
Yeah. Opening. Well, it's for me.
And take us expansive, Will. Do what you do best. Don't tell us where you're at short term. Lead us there. Yeah, short term. What's this going to be? What do you see in terms of this greater world where everybody's free to be themselves?
Yeah. Well, I can also start into really where I started to feel the impact of this technology.
All right.
And I actually really felt it when I was on a DMT trip, actually. And I was reading about blockchain before and just a little bit here and there. And then I saw this video of Vitalik Buterin,
Is that the guy that passed recently? God rest his soul.
no, 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 no.
Passed. I was like,
No, 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 no.
That's somebody
You know,
else.
he started Ethereum. He's
Okay.
like,
The guy you're alluding to now, you're reading about in this. Okay, got it.
yeah. And I saw this like talk on TechCrunch, and then this is when I was with a company that was like the opposite of decentralized, of the values of a decentralized framework. So yeah, she decided to smoke DMT, and 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 when I went into 4D, like this four-dimensional space, I saw what saw is not even, yeah, I mean, I saw these self transforming blocks like coming together in this like four-dimensional architecture of, I mean, an unimaginable amount of beauty. I mean, it was like the most astonishing and awestruck I'd ever been. And it was like, holy shit.
Like
And when I came out, my mind was literally like, holy fuck. I mean, and I mean, this was like
the tech rose garden. It was like you went to the rose garden and you saw tech roses.
Yeah, so like a little bit of background on myself also, like why I was even interested in this is like I was with a think tank called TAS. We're looking at like exponential technologies, and then we had this gentleman on our board named Alex Vikolov who talks about like extadelic. Well, his company is like extadelic media. If I'm pronouncing ecstatic media, I believe. And like he talks about these ideas that also Terence McKenna talked about, that our world will become virtually indistinguishable from virtual and augmented reality.
Well, we're
Where
bordering on transhumanism, which we'll talk about. Yeah.
Or yeah, and like we already are so tied in with digital photons, and like, well, we almost are like a cyborg in that sense. So when I got this feeling that our next stage as humanity evolving, like whether that is like after the event horizon passes, when the singularity in the next 20-25 years, where we may then be able to literally upload our consciousness, or not even upload in this techno-Luciferian way, but ascend also naturally, possibly through plant medicine psychedelics with technologies that we have then also emulated through our own consciousness.
Let's go slow, because again, I'm presenting a lot as beautiful. So for audience's sake, so Nikola Tesla, very famous thinker, many patents, many technologies that we still use today, controversial slightly. So with all the controversy aside, was known and described his process for inventions in a very inspired way as almost like an altered state of consciousness where he would visualize and see it. Now we spoke about alternative dimensions, consciousness levels.
Yeah.
So bear with me for the audience's sake. So we're literally talking about Will through the use of this plant medicine, which will be this next passion of how do you use that for consciousness engineering, which we'll get to after we wrap up this topic with Will, is this notion of using the plant medicine here. He saw, which I was interjecting, like the rose garden, only a technological rose garden, and saw what I would say Nikola Tesla would see, right? And then your access to that is then information being put into your your brain, your body,
Hmm.
and birth something. So what's interesting is now you're touching on something for the audience's sake. There's this notion of transhumanism, which is also very controversial, which has some controversy. And I want to pause here real quick, Will, because I told you about this quote a little while ago. So I mentioned Sadhguru, and so there is this quote, and we talked about it very synchronistically earlier. It's almost like we planned this, which we didn't. Intellect is like a knife. When you try to handle every aspect of your life with your intellect, it is like trying to stitch your clothes with a knife. So
Yeah.
I've already told you I was gonna ping you with this. So let's do it now and then continue on this technology for collective ascension, which is what you were talking about, which is we're gonna be able to literally take our consciousness and take it into these higher dimensional realms and transcend physical form, which is currency and all that, which ties to crypto. So what the risk for me and for many, hence the controversy around transhumanism and where is the source behind this movement, is there's a risk of too much intellect, right? There's this notion we
Yeah.
talked about it.
Yeah.
If technology is the heart or left hemisphere, and the heart, the mind is this, and the heart is this, then we risk, and you talked about it earlier, ironically or synchronistically, losing our natural harmony and resonance because we need, and I'm not advocating that technology is bad. What I'm saying is, and this is what I want to dive into more of, what is for you, how do you see this harmony between the technology and our nature? So we don't denature. So
Yeah.
we don't,
Hmm.
we don't lose, because what I sense, and I have a buddy, and I told you maybe about this buddy a while back, was a former law mentee of mine. And I even saw him recently from my IT. He does my IT, very prominent IT technician. And he, like you, loves the technology, knows all about it, and he keeps insisting I get into all of this like you do. God bless you both. He literally said to me that the heart and stuff, compassion, now he's a compassionate soul, a very sensitive man and loving and, has that. Only he sees it like what you talked about, weakness. So it's almost like heart is weak, and that this technology movement is almost like, no, for the greater whole of humanity, we can't be weak. We need to know what's better. That's what I see as the risk. There's some
Yeah. Well,
pushing
yeah.
agendas that may be
Huh.
insensitive or unnatural. So I wanted to interject that real quick before we continue
Yeah.
that quote of Sadhguru of intellect and the risks we have, which mirror the risks of technology. How are we going to lose our humanity in this technology? So how do you feel about that? I told you I was going to bring this up on today's live recording. So how do you feel about that? And tie that into your mission, and then unpacking where I paused you, which is you went into this state, you read this material, you also had the personal experience in this quote unquote tech rose garden analogy. So now with this interjected, how would you, because you and I had some topics, about this, some talks about this, right? That you have friends on both sides of the aisle, some that are very heady, heart, tech, we can't be, and then you have some that are, and some are in TAFs on both sides of the aisle, because I did the meditation with you all. So how do you reconcile this? How do you harmonize this? How do you see this?
Hmm. Well, yeah, I think it's like with every technology, there's like a double-edged sword to it. And
I know I put you
and
on the spot, so I'm
and
curious. Yeah.
and to well, before I actually touch
Yeah.
on like
Yeah. Back up
that,
a second. Yeah,
I
because I know I
think
accelerated.
yeah, I think what you're saying is like that we all have that like hidden agenda.
Mm,
And when we can, I think we all have a tendency, and myself included, is like we all like we forget first of all that people make up organizations. Like people, it's like people, and like we're people, and we have these emotions and everything, and things that we bring with us, like in the conditioning and everything like that. And so if we can like more so listen, then I think then that's where that portal can open up, where then we can start to ask the right questions. I mean, as we evolve, then we will be able to have this broader awareness and expanded consciousness to then ask more profound questions and more insightful and deeper questions, only from a place of the inner silence and stillness, not when the mind is going crazy and the mind thinks that it knows the key and it knows the answer.
that's what we're speaking. That's what I told you this offline, right? When I brought this,
Yeah.
I want to talk about this live is where that the mind. We're back to where we started, right? You don't know that you're in the mind trap.
Right.
How does somebody who's a leader, right? Because there's all this talk, God, every being is a divine being. So there's all this talk about bad mouthing, and you're right. We can't bad mouth anybody. Everybody's one. That Bill Gates has got an agenda, and it's like, okay, all this conspiracy nonsense aside, whether it's true or not, is okay. How does one who's a leader, let's say you're Bill, how do you know if you don't know you have you know what I mean? How do you know you're over mentalizing and you're imbalanced with your technology push? And that's the risk. That's why I think we're all grappling with, because we're all dealing with this together, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think that's where I think plant medicines will tell us what we're doing is wrong and not, because like they often tell us what we don't want to see, like they will show us the things we have been literally hiding from ourselves, the things that we have been fictitiously telling ourselves that on different superficial levels may be boosting up that ego and may be good for us, may be good for the collective egos, whether it be these massive corporations, or governments and cults and whatever it may be, because I think nature knows best. Like like evolution always wins. Like evolution always wins.
So let's separate that word, because evolution, for those that have studied the occult as much as I have, and the various nutty things and some unnutty, let's call it can we call it natural order instead of evolution? Okay.
Yeah.
Can we erase that and say natural order?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the natural order of what the nature has designed already. And what Terrence would talk about is that we are speeding up, that time is speeding up. And see like these techno people like Ray Kurzweil, probably at the pinnacle of the techno, world, that like the rate at which change is changing is actually accelerating itself. So it's hard for us to actually understand that. And he had this like paper I was reading. It's like you actually reading through a certain newspaper would be rewarded like $40 trillion from it, because it's like you're talking about the currency will be this different personified thing in this metaphysical universe that we will start elevating ourselves up to like that. So what Terrence will talk about, it's like that we're approaching this transcendental object at the end of time. And so that's also why like I brought in the name Gasho for this business venture that I'm starting, because it's how can we bring in this spirituality aspect of really what nature, the natural order, is trying to show us only when we can have the eyes, like when we can open up the spectrum. Yeah, open up that spectrum of awareness to see actually what it's trying to tell us for the next steps, to go with the flow, to go with,
So wait, so are you telling me, this is interesting because I have somebody that maybe I need to introduce you to now that I'm hearing this from you this way. Are you saying that the natural order, nature, algorithm, the divine God, whatever you want to call it, the universal intelligence, the oneness, that it's actually bringing us through a process to reorient to money and resources? Is that why Gasho, reverence and respect for money? And am I hearing you correctly in a way? I know you're not exactly.
It's that the money, time, and ego is illusion. It's an illusion. It doesn't actually exist. Like that's what's happening in crypto is that it's like redefining money through these consensus mechanisms, cryptographic consensus mechanisms, that we can now share value and say that this is something that I see as this, you see it as that, and then if we have this shared belief around it, then it can be that. And I think Rick Doblin had this good saying. I was watching him on this podcast the other day.
Rick, who? Say the name again.
Rick Doblin, the founder of MAPS. Like he was saying that true democracy is when we can disagree about 1,000 things, and then if we can agree on one thing, just one thing, agree on one thing, and then we can find a connection and a bond around that, and then birth values and systems of weighing to cooperate around that.
Well, it seems like that common thing is a common kindle. Let's use an alchemy.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
sparks or catalyzes then this
Yeah.
like collective.
Yeah, that's so true.
As soon as I did that, my camera got blurry because my camera's like, what is all this movement? Interesting. Very interesting. So then how do you bring in the consciousness engineering? Because you alluded to it, right? They kind of go hand in hand. How do you bring in the consciousness engineering through the plant medicine? Bring that in. So let's kind of add to the pot, this melting pot, because that seems to be your two passions, right? Is blockchain, crypto technologies for to build this vision that you have through your transformation. And then the other is consciousness engineering, which they go hand in hand, correct? So
well, I can I mean, I can only speak from my own personal experience. And so like,
what you're passionate about it is what
like for me, my personal experience is that I was conditioned and growing up through like a modality of learning, like integrative learning. So it was extremely integrative like that. And so some things what Terrence McKenna would talk about is to go into these other dimensions, these higher dimensional phases, that if you can then come back with something from that, like some message from that, and then share that here, that, and then so first, before we could even share it, you have to be able to integrate that information and coding into the singularity, because if you're breaking through the space-time continuum and everything, it's like, oh fuck, like
well, let's pause again. So go back 4 systems that I allude to, right, is the way you make up your whole. So it's funny now listening to you, it makes sense why a lot of these finance concepts or tools or technologies in the finance arena or blockchain are quantum, really coming from quantum physics. So it's this notion is what I'm hearing from you, that you have to take, so here's what I'm hearing it as. So I talk about it this way: light, energy, pure energy in the system of energy, right? Energy, mind, heart, body, 4 systems. Energy is light. Pure light is what I call as codex. And here you are using the same terms because apparently in crypto, they use the same terms. So I say that the codex comes down, then the mind and heart, the software, here's the program. Program gives you the codex, the light, and then the light contains information like crypto does. So that makes sense why crypto is little packets of light. And then, and this is important because they talk about integration in the plant medicine community. What's fascinating is now I'm like, oh, wow, this is brilliant. And how I'm seeing it, because, and what you're saying is brilliant, because integration in my terminology means when the light comes in, if you don't integrate it, you blow a gasket, because then you have to take light and convert it into biophysical form, into carbon. So the light comes in, bear with me, Will, light comes in, and I've done other videos on this, so if you've never heard this for the sake of the audience, light comes in, mind, neurosynaptic firing, heart, emotions, and then lastly, the body at the bottom of the systems is then carbon, organs, cells formed from that light. You're speaking to actually absorbing and doing something with that biofunctionally, harmoniously. Blow a gasket.
And yes, and now with the technology that's here with cryptography, is that we don't need a middleman to come together and socially coerce. Like it solves the like the Byzantine general fault tolerance problem. Where now we're able to.
Whoa! What is that?
The Byzantine fault tolerance problem was like where there's this dictator sitting in this. So it's like, let's say that here's like this castle or something like that, like with all these bad troops. Yeah, and then there's one guy who wants to send a message across the network that before could be intercepted by the troops.
Intermediaries, like I was.
Exactly. So now think about socially, how we can create movements together, like how we can go out and collaborate and like actually and take action with our ideas, and then create a decentralized application rather than being it through this intermediary, through government, state. Even now, the ability to create decentralized autonomous organizations, which is like a DAO. I'm convinced it's like the DAO, you know, like
the DAO mark.
But I think it is like the DAO of everything, because I think this is like the most revolutionary thing.
So you're saying it'll become almost like a quantum market. Now we have like
Literally,
the stock market will have a quantum. Oh, that's a
yeah, well, it'll be like our ideas can then be run on code, self-executing for himself for the like Withian values and goals that we then set out for it, that it can then run on these public blockchains.
Now I get what you've been
for like for these shared goals and shared missions that we have together, collectively, like that.
Well, now I get it. Now I get what you've been telling me the last couple of months, because now it makes sense what you were saying, because it was like, whoa, I need to foundation of tech, because I see it more clearly now. It ties it together, because if we use these quantum technologies, then we can almost construct a formless society.
Literally.
And then that then helps us, because we're not bound by form, which is one of the restrictions we have.
Yeah, and there was literally like a meta nations, like a meta
United Nations.
Literally like a meta
That's the
nation.
last thing we need, is we need a formless formless. Like that's like a paradox wrapped in an enigma. I think that's the risk. Real quick, I think that's the risk, because the risk is if, and this is part of what I'm going to release soon in the next few weeks on LinkedIn, is this notion of, if we take any residue of any of the old constructs, we're going to be, even if it's a trace, it will be impure, what we're going to create. And that's where I don't think we should model it off of,
and it'll ripple and have these unseen effects.
Correct. It'll be more impure, butterfly effects. So I think that's why when you said anarchy, I think we can't necessarily draw from what we have. We're in this transcendent state. We're in transition. So what is becoming has not become, and what was no longer is. So we're in this middle thing that's in flux. So therefore, that's why I don't like when we say we're going to make it like anarchy. We're going to make it like this, because it's like, no, let's let that fade out completely. So this new thing can
yes.
All right. Yeah. So talk to us about Planet, and then we'll wind down with the legacy and kind of close out. So why? Oh, well, let me give this quote to kind of get you fueling even more and point you in a direction, so to speak. So another Sadhguru quote that I was like, I got to share this, because I knew what the two passions you have are. And now we're talking about consciousness engineering. Again, Sadhguru, a fellow, mystic, practical mystic, he talks about inner engineering. Gave me the kudos. Thank you again for the systems I taught you, which is, again, inner work, inner systems. It's science and spiritual together. It takes inspiration and activity to the point of insanity to create something truly worthwhile for everyone. Again, it takes inspiration and activity to the point of insanity to create something truly worthwhile for everyone. And this is what I think, the mystics call the wine of the mystic, or this notion of being divinely, again, the divine inspiration coming through the light. So I sense this is your point, right? Like this, I said earlier, it helped you go insane, not like crazy. Yeah, go ahead. Bring it forward.
And if I might for a second, like Naveen Jain will say, like,
what's up?
Naveen Jain will say, like, if your idea isn't crazy, then you're not thinking big enough. And like any crazy idea, like the day before, exactly. Like the day before it's a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea.
Yeah, you're going through the mind if you think it's not crazy, because the mind is going, this is beyond me.
Yeah, it's so conditioned in the thinking that, what you must be thinking must be so out there that you must be crazy. And then it's like, well, this is something else. It's an ulterior way of seeing it.
Pause for a second. Did you ever have a fear? This is something I face a lot with clients. It's like, oh my God, Haas, you gave me so much permission. Some people actually hit me up for the first season and say, hearing you talk about some of this stuff that, oh my God, it was so taboo, or this and that, it was liberating. Did you ever have a fear that, oh my God, I may be shunned by my peers, my parents, my family, because this may seem
for a little bit? And then I was like,
well, how did you deal with that? Hold on, before you jump ahead to I got rid of it, how did you deal with it? Because that is an impetus that many feel, and I know personally because they've told me, thank you, Oz, you make me feel more comfortable to bring this insane, not like it's crazy, as in it's a novel, creative thought leader, ahead of the curve idea, and that's what we have to do.
I mean, the people who change the world the most are actually these crazy individualists who everyone disagrees with, and then they are the ones who change the course of humanity. So
have you heard that quote by Gandhi? First they laughed at you, first they laugh at you, then they fight with you, then something, and then they agree with you. It's what you're saying.
Yeah, and yeah.
How did you deal with it? How did you say to F it, I'm gonna do this still? How did you get over that social conditioning, self-doubt, or self-censorship based on social fear, social conditioning of, again, a
By
bad.
knowing myself, and knowing that I don't need the validation of anyone. I don't need
So what did
anyone's
that require? What did that require? Because then you have to be whole, feel safe in your heart, hint, hint, to do
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Well, it's bringing in the self-awareness, like knowing myself and knowing my insecurities, and then bringing awareness, like so that when the light of awareness is there, I'm not the insecurities. It's just all it is the conditioning coming up and saying maybe this is what it should be, but guess what? It's not actually who I am. Like,
So you push through by dissolving and seeing the conditioning as
yeah,
conditioning, not
yeah.
again, oh no,
But
staying in the trap.
yeah, yeah. And another key feature of blockchain is that it's like this permissionless place where we don't need permission now to go out and cooperate and make ideas. So I think what that will do for plant medicine is astronomical. I mean, the ability for people to go out and talk about these ideas, not needing the government backing, not needing institutions to back the ideas, to go against the norm, to go against the, the religious hierarchies,
Hmm.
to go against the government hierarchies. That you don't need, all you need is courage. And you need, and
And
then when
love,
you have
according to the Beatles.
the
Courage and love,
truly, yeah. Like,
which is love is that frequency. So it sounds like
yeah,
that frequency of knowing made you dissolve your self-doubt and then alchemized it, right? So love
yeah,
alchemizes. And so then it transformed it into confidence or courage, as you use the word.
yeah,
So
that's
where do
good.
we go with plant medicine in terms of the societal pressures and risks? And some people, as
Well,
I've told you, aren't ready, right? Because you talked about Kundalini.
yeah.
What if I give a guy a too big of a dose of psilocybin and they haven't done the foundational? And I think that's the problem with, no offense, sorry to sound like one of those people, with your generation, which isn't only a decade after me, which is like, okay, I get it. I get it. I've done rich ceremony. I have teacher plants. I get that. It's more of, not everybody's done that foundational work that you and I have done. And what I see is this risk of more demons coming up, more
But
shit.
yeah, I don't think though that you can ever actually prepare for these experiences because even the
All right, talk
shaman
to me.
who has done
Unpack it.
it
Talk to me. Yeah.
can never really prepare because
Correct. I agree with that.
it's like again, all fear is rooted in fear of death. And until you've accepted your fate, like
Did you really say
then
that? Did you really say
yeah.
that? My first 5-MeO experience in a shamanic ritual ceremony with a dear soul brother who shares your North Node that I've mentioned to you once. Literally, my intention, because I'm very intentional, was to face my fear of death because my brother had killed himself a year earlier. Mortality, the
Hmm.
impermanence. So you're literally, that's very beautifully worded, because I would agree with you from my own personal experience, because I know you're speaking from your own personal experience. So I think we have now more convergence of that
Abs-
objectivity, because I would
mm.
say, oh, F yeah. And then I literally woke up off the ground, and everybody was looking at me, and I'd lost like 15 pounds, it felt like. And what's going on? I felt light as a bucket. It was like, I use this analogy of God squeegee. It was like the universe had just squeegeed me out. And I
Oh.
literally couldn't explain it to anybody. I was like the rose garden, right? I was like, yeah, that what you're doing, right? And it's interesting that you say this, because I agree with you and disagree with you. I'm holding the
Hmm.
duality, because yes, you can't prepare, because I couldn't have prepared for that shit. I would have been like, oh, the mind. No.
Yeah.
And still, there was a guy purging, actually, who works with, God bless him, Joe Rogan. He was one of his production teams, apparently.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and he was purging. He was in our circle, and he was purging a lot. And it was just like his 20th circle. God bless this guy. And I'm like, dude, you need to do some other, because it became a crutch. That's what I'm saying is this risk. So technology would address that. The risk I see here is people are like, I'm going to get a gym membership the
But
first.
I don't know
Yeah, talk to me.
if I
Yeah,
don't know about that because if I may, for me, on some of the more darker ones, it's like,
yeah.
well, I never want to do this again because it's so
We'll talk about that.
terrifying.
That's back to shadow work. So
Well,
unpack
yeah, and this is
that.
also what like Dennis McKenna, the guy, Terrence's brother, who's still alive with
He has a
Hefner.
brother? I didn't know that. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
bro, come on, yeah,
I
he,
told you,
yeah,
I learned from you too, bro. You always put me on a pedestal. I was like, I learned from you too. The teacher is the student, and the student is, it's both two-way
yeah,
street, duality.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and he's talked about it himself that like, after some of the experience, it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't really want to do that again because it's like it's showing you that shadow work within yourself that you've been hiding from. And it's like, all right, that was
I'm
yeah,
good.
that
That's what
yeah,
Tony
I'm good.
Robbins said on Mike Tyson's show when he finally did Toad.
Yeah,
Tofu.
yeah, I was finally watching that.
Oh, you watched
Yeah,
what I was telling you?
yeah.
So talk to me about your shout, because that give an experience for the audience, because there's people, I literally had one person reach out and he's like, I'm going to do it, old timer, like in his 60s. And he was like, I'm
Oh,
going to do plant medicine. I'm like, have you done any type of psychotherapy? No. And it was like, I did a consult with him and I was like, ugh, because of this notion of not necessarily preparation as much as give people a flavor of what a bad, not that they're bad trips, what we call let's call it a grueling trip, to be intentional, a more shadow work experience. What was that like? Not the details, don't recreate it. More of give a flavor for like, oh shit, Haas, this is what I mean by I would never want to do it again. What did you gain and why were you
sure.
like, oh shit, I would never want to do that again? So people understand
So
more.
what did I get? Did you want to first hear what I gained from it, or
However,
like
bro,
what?
there's no script.
Yeah, well,
However,
what?
yeah, we're
I
flowing.
mean, it's like imagine like the darkest thoughts and emotions and
Give me
feelings
an
that you could.
example. Like I said, be raw. Hence,
Okay, yeah. So the darkest like of like that feeling of, oh, I hate myself, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy
beautiful.
of love.
You felt that for reals? Okay,
Yeah,
talk
I
to us. Keep
felt
going.
that. I felt that in the where then time distorts. So then it felt like that was the only reality that could ever exist. And then so the
Yeah. In this
extreme.
in the ceremony, holy shit.
Oh
So
no, I've never been in a ceremony.
no, I
Yeah,
meant like in this experience with plant medicine, you were
in the
locked in that emotion.
yeah, locked in the motion of absolute self hatred so much where it was so
The teacher
yeah.
held you, the plant, they call them plant teachers in the indigenous tradition for what Will is describing. It holds you like the Zen master
And
up
look,
to
I'm
it.
even like holding myself like this because
Yeah.
it's like
It
it's
holds you
intense.
up to it real quick. Will it holds you up to it, right? I have similar experience.
Yeah,
And then it goes, pay attention, see this icky feeling. You can't run from it. It sounds like that's what happened. It was like
literally.
you were there. And it's like, no, you
Yeah,
gotta feel this.
yeah. And then that was kind of one of the first ones I've had where I didn't
Okay.
know how to deal with it. And then I kind of as I learned more, I was like, then you feel it, and when you feel that fully, then it's like you go through the tunnel into the next one, and then the next phase, and then the next phase. And so when you come
Onion,
out, it's like,
like an
oh
onion, layers.
yeah,
Like layers
yeah.
of energy, dross energy coming off.
Yeah. It's like all this stuff had been within me that I didn't even know was there. All these emotions that I didn't even know. So then it brings in the more inquiry where it's like, I'm so now interested, where it brings so many more questions, like where you want to go in with you want to going into the experience, you want to get the answers, but coming out, you come out with so many more questions than answers. And I think that's a good thing though, because watch my language there. I think that's a good thing because when we can ask the right questions, then it will point to deeper and more profound truths to help us evolve within ourselves and then help evolve the collective consciousness like that. And
Did you ever feel, or I don't know, I haven't looked at the stats in a while because I know there's a lot of studies, John Hopkins, you name it, for plant medicine. Have you ever studied if there are deaths from cannabis, deaths from DMT, deaths from psilocybin?
someone, Alejandro de la Parra Solomon, actually, we said that there was some incident. I'm not sure, like if that was kind of
It's like rare,
prior.
right? They're outliers.
Yeah, I'm not
What
sure if
I've
it was
seen is it's
prior.
rare to die.
I've never heard of anyone dying from this
And
experience.
it's important to explain to people because some of the
I mean,
some of the somatosensory experiences, which Will is alluding to, I personally can attest to. You may feel like you're dying, and some people trip out. They get in their head again and they loop,
yeah,
right?
yeah, well, definitely. I mean, the physical sensation of death is real. That experience when you're going
Would you
through
say that's your ego
DMT,
death? Would you say that's
well,
your
it's
ego
like I mean, that's like the high dose experience is when your physical body is no more.
So ego
And
death, in a way, ego death is
the
what they
yeah,
call
the
it.
full on ego death. And that's actually the most when it's like how even day to day, like when I do the things I'm most afraid of, I feel so much better right afterwards like that. it's kind of like that with the ego death. When that happens, then you feel so liberated that
Well, you got rid of the junk, like that particular person in my circle, the production guy. It
yeah,
I think goes back to this point, the choice. It's like a roller coaster is how I describe to people. You can clench your butt cheeks and oh no, it's scary. And that's when you have a bad trip and you loop, or you can go, okay, squeeze me out. Let me sweat it out. Let me go. It's safe.
yeah,
And that goes back to your theme of allowing, surrendering, or what I call
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yes. That's what I would say in most of my plant ceremonies, the handful I've done, is I was a big yes guy. Apparently there's archetypes, and you know this because you've studied it as a psychonaut, is the industry, that there's cosmic archetypes. People fall into patterns in these ceremonies where they display certain psychological archetypes. I was the cosmic Buddha, laughing Buddha. I laugh. I think I've told you I laugh a lot. And I yes, yes, because I was like, it was instinctive. My whole life, I've been this rigid, scared. All this people have heard in my story, experience, show, etc. That and if you don't know me, yeah, I was very, and I thought I was loose. And yeah, I was so contrary to that. And that's the gift, right? It takes you
Yeah.
out of that limitation
Mm,
being into your true
yeah.
being. And then I came out, like I said earlier, like, whoa, I feel lighter. I feel so wow. And
Yeah, and it makes me think like, well, can I still have this feeling of being without a body? And the answer is yes. Like,
that's
and that's
the one.
hard to come to terms with.
Yeah.
That's extremely hard to come to terms with. Because especially when you come back and you share that with someone else, they're like, what the fuck did you just smoke? Like,
So you saying that then the technology goes hand in hand because then you can use these in tandem, which is why Gasho has two arms. So real quick, because we mentioned it and it popped in a few minutes ago to bring it back up because we overlooked it. Integration. Now let's finish this plant medicine topic on integration in terms of plant medicine, because you talked about integration earlier in terms of another topic or a corollary topic. What was your experience in integrating your learnings or lessons or these expanded states of consciousness from the plant medicines?
mm, mm,
What was your
I've always,
process? Yeah.
yeah, I've always been an extremist. So I always take things to the extreme, basically for anything.
Not me.
And yeah, so for me, it was like finding that harmony again. So coming back from this out of body experience and not even near death, but death experience. Like, um, it's having this new appreciation. I mean, this new unbelievable appreciation for myself, not in the egoic sense, but for what I am, like what is deep within myself, and really appreciate myself so that that love can fill up so much, and then it can exude and share that with others. So the biggest thing for me is wanting to share it. I mean, because we are social beings, we are social creatures. And so kind of what I was saying before, like Terence McKenna in one of his lectures was saying like, well, imagine like we're all like in the Peru and we're like singing and chanting or something like that. And smoking a joint or joints passing around, and you see this like fruit up in the tree or something like that, and point to that like, yes, take that, take that. And so for me, it's like I've been wanting to share that with other people. And on a day-to-day basis for integrating, it's really slowing down and paying more attention to the quality of what I'm doing and not being so lost in the doing, being lost in the activity of play,
Mm.
of the form. And you know, so it's that finding that non-dualism to feel the stillness while in the activity as well, so that I don't, so that the inner dimension isn't lost, like
Wow.
that awakening that happens. So it's not gone because it is eternal. And then the more awareness is brought in, and you can then like tune like a fork, like this tuning fork that even Nikola Tesla would talk about, that, you know, it can tune into these other frequencies and love and happiness and gratitude and generosity and giving and feeling this feeling of interconnectedness
Mm.
with everything and other people. And that, I mean, especially like I think my relationship, the ability for me to want to the ability to connect was also much deeper and profound because I wasn't bringing the ego so much into my connections with other people, where I wasn't worried so much about how they thought I like. Because when you look at someone and you're afraid of what their response is to what you're saying. So it's this, this like the Kundalini mirror, like that, that's like coming back. And so having that like self-awareness is like the most critical component for the integration.
Mm.
Because as before, it was like that I am me, I am Will Coburn, and all my identifiable traits and personality characteristics makes it up me is not me, that there is this underlying field of awareness of all the little projections that my mind is deluding me into thinking that I am.
Mhm.
And then when there are all these delusions of, oh, look at me, I am this, and
Mm.
I want you to believe me and hear what I'm saying, like that creates borders between the other, because there really isn't the other. And like even in this conversation, like acknowledging you almost as like myself in disguise is like the greatest spiritual practice.
I am another you, or I
Yeah.
in you. It's interesting that you said that. It's all brilliant
Yeah.
as usual. It's interesting that you said what I think Alan Watts described. You have to be awake and relaxed. You have
Mm.
to be still and active. And it's again
Yeah.
embracing dualities. And that's when people talk 5D, 3D. 5D is non-binary. 5D is all oneness.
Mm.
And then 3D is all aloneness, or what you ended right there with, which we differentiate that I am all alone, not
Mm.
all one. So that's really what, if you've ever heard of these dimensions, we're in going the fifth dimension. It's a state of being which correlates to your state of consciousness, which is your vibratory ability or capacity to integrate higher velocities of energy. It's really
Yeah.
basic if you really do that. Albert Camus. It is really all simple. It is humans that make it complex.
Yeah.
Authors. So, is there anything you want to say, share before we wrap up with the famous question of what do you want to be remembered by when you leave this plane, your AKA, your legacy, and an inspired quote? Before you get there,
Mm.
we haven't covered that you felt inspired. I know I interjected a lot. This episode, I felt, I always feel excited. This one, we're really riffing on some like cool things I was learning from you. So if I interrupted a lot, I apologize.
Yeah. I mean, when I think about legacy, I don't really care about how people remember me so much. So I think what I try to do is like live as much as I can in this moment.
Mm.
And then when I can live as much in this moment, then I can have the impact of whatever intent that may be coming out from certain instance. Although there is this eternal quality to everything, there like time has like a utility to it. And when you are in the 3D, time is real. And so like for me, it's like making sure I'm 100% clairvoyant on the intention. And then when I can then feel the intention as the quality of who I am, then that can exude out and then actually have the effect onto others. And so the effect really is to really help awaken other people to their true nature, that they are so much more than what their mind and social upbringing and societal and familial patterns and beliefs and constructs are telling you to be, that there are inner dimensions within yourself to be explored. And so that there is this like convergence of technology and spirituality now, where you go and see like Neil deGrasse Tyson go and talk that there are like other dimensions, or like Sean Carroll, like talk about how there are other dimensions curled up like that. Well, then like shamans will say that these dimensions are actually within us that we can perceive. And so like my obsession to to bring this to others, to share this, because I mean, we also like I rely on you just as much as you do on me, like to kind of fulfill our duties, like in a way that we'll be there for each other. We've got each other's back. I also got all these other people's back, and you've got all their backs. And then we're going to come to arms together and then do something else and great for humanity, and be able to do things like, and not, and I think people have a hard time with that, because when they see other people going out and do great things, and they get insecure and they don't want other people to be happy because they're projecting
Well,
from
they're in
within.
your cage, and
Yeah,
you're free from your cage.
yeah. And so it's showing that that cage is a delusion.
Everybody's
Like,
got to do their own work, as you alluded to. So let me hear this. Let me get this correct. So you did state your legacy. So here it is. Is this, as I hear you correctly, is to awaken others to their fullest being.
absolutely.
So you heard it here live. I'm telling you, this guy is only getting started. This only getting, and this biological form is young. This soul, as you sense, is not. There's nothing young about his soul's experience. Is actually going to bring the rose garden here. Like I said, Sadi couldn't do it. Maybe William can do it. And
and,
I sense that your intention is, and
and
I sense you will be able to more and more to bring that
and
rose
I,
garden here.
and I would like to I would love to say a quote, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. Where anything else?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Do the quote and anything else you want to wrap up with. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So this quote is from Terrence McKenna, who I guess the audience can now tell is I'm definitely one of his number one fan.
Hey, I'm a big fan of T Money too. Rest his soul. Yeah.
um, he says, you are an explorer and you represent our species. And the greatest good you can do is to bring back a new idea, because our world is endangered by the absence of good ideas. Our world is in crisis because of the absence of consciousness. So it's like bringing this back, this like acceptance of where we're at, and then the ability to ask the right questions so that we can awaken the consciousness. And then when we ask the questions, then we go out to explore and to be these voyagers and pioneers into a whole other worlds that we can then explore. And it seems like Richard Branson and Bean Jane and Jeff are doing that with space. I mean, I still think that we should focus here on this planet
Inner
and
space.
inner space,
The
like
last frontier. The last
yeah.
real frontier.
Because honestly, Haas, I think that nature, the natural order, knows how to heal itself. Because right? I mean, it's like people don't really know how to heal themselves until I think they can quiet the voice and let the bioelectrical processes happen within themselves to naturally heal ourselves. And
then extend that to heal everyone around us.
yeah, and be that beacon, for
Be
others.
the beacon. I mean, it's in the word beacon. It's
Yeah,
your beacons are things they're emitting that which they are. So you
yeah,
can't emit that which you're not. And so if you
yeah.
think you are this when you're not this, then you're emitting not thisness. And so that's why everybody in the world is like, why do we have so many things we don't want? Because we all think we're something we're not, and we're emitting beacons. There, that was all new. I have not scripted any of that.
That's beautifully said.
Well, your quote was mind-blowing, as your essence is. Any final words before we wrap up and I give the closing?
Well, I just want to thank you, Haas, really
Just
again
thank me.
for
Well,
opening.
you want to just me? Don't just me.
Haas, I want to thank you for opening this space. You are a saint, my brother. I love you, and I appreciate everything that you've offered me. And knowing you has been truly such a blessing. And I can't wait to help spread your message as well to others, because I know, Haas, that you're going to have an incredible impact on humanity.
We're only getting started. And thank you, bro. I receive all of that, and amen. It's a mutual resonance. We're only getting started. And that's why this show is what it is. Because if you share this, if you liked what you heard and you share this, you're sharing the message of two beings, two leaders, two ascending leaders that are here to support a collective process. So it's almost like if you share this and you like what you heard and you spread the word, you're actually supporting this collective mission of getting all of us, or as I say, together we rise. So if you like this, spread it, share it, support it. You can find out more about Will in the comments section below. Check out more about who he is and look him up. And he's only getting started as well. So thank you, Will. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story, being candid. Thank you in the audience for being here on the Vulnerable Power Show as we enter deeper into the second season. Again, catch up if you haven't. Look down on the YouTube channel, subscribe, and as I said, share the love by spreading the message. We're here to light up the world. We're here to show the future of heart-centered leadership ascension, in order to inspire you, encourage you, and empower you, so you too can step into your soul's calling. So you can be equipped. If you're listening to this, and if you're on the fence wherever you are, if you're advanced or a newbie, I don't know, what is my calling? Or I know I'm ready for an up level. So you too can be equipped to make that impact, because it's going to take all of us together. So Will, thank you on behalf of William and myself, Hasadegi. Thank you again, and have a very blessed day.